Hello and welcome to the Introduction to Shares course. My name is Steve Dix and it's my pleasure to take you through your first step into the exciting world of investments. Perhaps our first start in the course should be to look at the investment scenario in general in South Africa prior to getting involved more specifically in shares and investments. Let's look at an introduction to investments, and this will be covered in lessons 1 to 3 of your course book. Now, the starting points for anyone's investments should be based upon what they bring home at the end of each month. In other words, no one can invest unless they are earning some form of income, be it a salary or a wage. And if we were to be honest with ourselves and say what our priorities were, how do we spend this money that we earn at the end of each month, it would be most likely that our first priority would be a repayment of the bond on our house or the rental against a house. Certainly you would need to put food on the table. You would have to pay for transportation. Perhaps another priority would be education of your children. In other words, there are a variety of different expenses that take our salary away from us each month. And if I were to ask you how much of that salary you would then save, your most likely answer would be, well, if there's anything left over, I would save that. However, if we were brutally honest with ourselves, is there ever anything left over? And the answer would have to be no, because life has a way of taking most of our earnings from us, even despite when we get an increase in earnings or salary. We find ways of spending that, and inevitably there's very little, if anything, left over. Now, this seems to be the wrong way around, because after all, you're the person who's earned that salary, and yet you're the last person to benefit from it. So in order for us to take a first serious step into the world of investments, we have to make sure that we pay ourselves first, that the savings portion gets put right up front, and that you become the first recipient of a portion of what you earn. Now, that can be a small portion, can be 5%, 2%. Perhaps you should sit down with your partner and decide upon what percentage of your earnings is to be put aside for savings purposes. Because unless you make that decision about putting aside 5 or 2%, whatever it might be, you will never ever start your first step on the road of investments, because we need to have some amount of money available to take that first step. A good idea is to in fact write down and sign something stating the amount that you are prepared to put aside of your earnings each month. And I can assure you that once you've made that decision, the money will simply go away into a debit order or a stop order or some form of putting the money aside, and you won't even notice that it's gone. So folks, the first step in this process is to make that concrete decision about putting a portion of your salary aside. Now, let's assume that you've done this and you are now accumulating a small lump sum of money. The next question that you need to answer is, well, where would I put these funds? So if you've got the saving, there are many areas in which you can find a home for that saving, many possible investment arenas. And no doubt you're aware of many of them. You could, for example, go to a bank, put the money onto a fixed deposit. You could invest in what are called unit trusts. You could go to an insurance company and take out an endowment policy. You could perhaps further invest into property, or you could invest your money onto the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, into shares on the JSE. So folks, there are many different and varied forms of investment opportunities. And the one thing that we must know about these different options is that they operate on a continuum. What I mean by that is that at the one end, we have low returns, and on the other end, we have high returns. And in between those two options, we obviously have some investments that are neither particularly high nor particularly low in terms of the return that they offer. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, why should I bother with low returns? I mean, why don't we just go for those investments that offer a high return? And the answer to that question is, well, the problem is that with high returns, goes a high level of risk. And with low returns goes a low level of risk. So that means that if you want a high return, you have to be prepared to take a risk. There's no guaranteed investment that offers you a high return and that offers it on a consistent basis. You have to be prepared to take the risk in achieving that. Now, if we were to position these various options on that continuum, we would find that an option such as a fixed deposit would offer you a relatively low return, but at the same time, you're taking no risk at all, other than that banking system collapsing and you losing the money. But ultimately, you're not going to take any risk in losing the money that you put with that bank. On the upper end of that continuum, investing in shares or investing in unit trusts would fall, because here you are taking the risk of not only not getting a return on the investment, but also you take the risk of perhaps even losing some of the capital that you invested in the first place. Now you might say to me, well, I'm not prepared to take that chance. And this is one of the problems in the South African investment scenario, is that so few people are prepared to take that chance that on the day they retire, they are inevitably disappointed with the kind of return that they've realized over all those years. And had they taken the trouble and time simply to collect the knowledge, and that knowledge is certainly available, and I'm going to give a lot of that to you, if you'd taken time out to obtain the necessary knowledge, you would have been prepared to take that risk and to have achieved the kinds of returns that are available through investing in shares. So folks, we then have to look at two important factors that are going to assist us in our investment life working more at the higher end of the risk continuum. The first of those is that you need, the factor that I spoke about just now, you need knowledge. There's no point in taking a chance with your investments when you know nothing about the investment environment that you're getting involved in. And the second factor is that you have to be prepared to be patient. You have to be able to allocate time to becoming astute as an investor, and obviously to take advantage of the type of returns that are available on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. The Johannesburg Stock Exchange is not a get-rich-quick scheme, it's a get-rich-slow scheme. And therefore you have to be able to invest time and patience in order to achieve those kinds of returns. Now let's just for a moment have a look at the typical scenario of a person who's taken no risk at all in their investment life, and a person who has taken the time and trouble to accumulate the knowledge in order to invest in environments that are considered to be of a higher risk.